But,
Wow.
I just wanted to say that was right on time.
Well, thank you. Did you want to say something, Dr. Nelson?
Well, you're doing perfect.
And basically, to sum it all up, the power of life and death is within the tongue.
Wow, okay.
Exactly right.
Wow, well, thank you.
Exactly right.
You're welcome.
Thank you. You're right on target.
All right.
Bye.
Yes, that telephone number again is 803-748-9293, 748-9293, area code 803, and we have Dr. David Nelson on the phone with us. He is the author of Black Belt Healing, and he's discussing with us today some things that we can do to kind of conquer that pain that we may find ourselves in. And you know what, David, it's interesting that the caller mentioned that she was working muscle groups that she hadn't worked in a while, and she was in, quote unquote, pain. Okay, but she refused to really acknowledge it or to speak that into existence. But you know what? I've been taking for a week now Ashtanga yoga, which is a power yoga. And it's very fluid, it's flowing, it's a lot of energy, and it is kicking my butt. Now, the cool thing about it, though, day one, I really had a hard time. I really had a hard time. But now, like, today was the 5th day. I feel great. I wake up at 4:30, which I thought I would never wake up at 4:30 to do a 6 a.m. anything. Okay. I just wake up now, and I feel great. But I noticed those first few days, my body, really was like, and I've been practicing yoga for a while, and my body was just like, oh, you thought you knew. But what I ended up doing, I said, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm just going to keep going.
Keep on going.
Yeah, and now, today, I'm still struggling because it's a very hard class, but it didn't feel like struggling. It just felt like, I don't know, like I finally connected with where my body was with this particular practice, and it was okay.
What you're doing, and what the lady who called in is doing, is you're basically embracing your current situation. You're entering into where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
You acknowledge your current reality. Yeah, I hurt, but I have options. I can focus on other things.
Right.
One of the self-talks that I give to people, I'll share that with you in a little bit, but what I did want to talk a little bit about, I also talk about not feeding the bears.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I just wrote that down, feeding the bears. What does that mean?
What that means is usually when the grip of pain grabs onto you, again, our fight or flight reaction kicks in. It's just like facing a grizzly bear.
Mm-hmm.
Pain can be like the grizzly bear. And if you fight, you feed the bear. If you fight a grizzly bear, you lose. You feed the bear. If you run from a grizzly bear, well, you lose.
You lose. Right.
You feed the bear.
Right.
So if you struggle, if you're fighting and running from pain constantly, you can't manage something you're constantly struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's learning to basically play dead and be still and watch. And then that gives you a new perspective. That's the stepping in. That's the entering in and just being present with your discomfort as opposed to struggling with it. You're just being present. And then you can see your options. Because when we're under a state of stress, because the painful, uncomfortable situations puts our mind into that stress, fight, or flight reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately we get tunnel vision. And so we have to learn just to be present. And that's where a lot of the meditative aspects come into being able to quiet the mind so you can just watch. Even when you're in discomfort, you can just learn to watch.
Wow, so you become the observer.
You're right. You learn to identify with who you are more as the witness, as the observer, as opposed to the action that's going on. And it's amazing how it ceases to grip you over time. A Zen teacher used to say, if you practice Zen, your mind becomes like Teflon. Nothing sticks.
Nothing sticks, yes.
But otherwise, it's like Velcro. Everything globs on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're all walking around, with pans on our heads. We're Teflon.
Right. But that just seems so challenging, especially for those of us in the West who might not be that familiar with Eastern mystical teachings, or at least that's what it's labeled as. Mm-hmm. And so we look at everything is it, well, let me ask you this, because I do want to get back to the book. I just have so many things I want to ask you about. But with the book now, are you able to teach a person how to go into that meditative state of mind when they find themselves, you know, in pain? Or can they get this out of the book? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the book is a self-help manual. It'll show you how. Basically, I show people how to do Zen meditation.
Okay.
So many people have erroneous ideas of what it's about, and then I also show people how to do basically self-hypnosis by showing them that your mind is a dojo. A dojo is a martial arts studio, and dojo literally means a hall of enlightenment.
Mm.
And our subconscious mind is that formal dojo. That's our hall of enlightenment that we actually have in there. Many people don't realize that a traditional Japanese dojo is actually a map of the mind.
Really?
Yes, and so I walk people through the dojo of their mind, and in your in the entrance area, that's your conscious mind. That's where you change your clothes when you're getting preparing to go work in your subconscious mind. You have to put aside who you are, and that's represented by everybody puts on like a white uniform. They take their shoes off. I don't care if you're a doctor or a plumber or a ditch digger. You're all the same in the dojo. You leave all that worldly stuff behind in the foyer. And that represents our conscious mind, our analytical, worldly mind.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have to enter a gate, which is really important. That's the access to subconscious mind, because it's sort of like, it doesn't like us being in there.
Right.
Mess around.
Right.
But in the dojo itself, we have if you went into an actual dojo, you would see weapons on the wall, and I picture people 3 weapons. A samurai primarily used 3 swords.
Mm-hmm.
He had a long sword, a short sword, and a knife.
Mm-hmm.
And we have those corollaries inside of our mind. Our long sword, our most powerful weapon, is the imagination. Our short sword is our emotions, and the knife is our faith system. And so when you have to train yourself, just like as you have to train yourself in the use of a sword, you also have to train yourself in the use of your mind swords. And the Japanese have this saying that the sword will either take your life, or the sword can either give you life. The same with our mind swords. If you
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
I'm just rambling, but go ahead.
No, you're not. I'm blown away because, first of all, I'm an implement. You've made me look at my yoga studio totally different. I'm thinking, wait a minute, that sounds like my studio is a dojo. I just don't have the sword and the knives and everything. But
oh, go get your some.
But that makes so much sense. And I wanted to ask you again to repeat the 3 swords. You said the long one was imagination. I love that. I love the visual of that. So the long sword is the imagination.
That's the basic samurai katana, the samurai sword that people see. Then they have a short sword called the wakizashi, and that's your emotions.
Okay.
Then you have your knife. That's your faith system, your belief system. You don't need a lot of faith. A little bit of faith goes a long way.
Right, exactly.
That's our close quarters combat when all else fails to pray. but
right.
So there was a famous swordsman, Japanese swordsman. His name is Musashi, and it's called the Book of 5 Rings. He wrote a book out there many years ago. But he never lost a fight, and that's because he trained in the 2-sword method. He always used 2 swords as opposed to 1 sword.
Mm-hmm.
And so we use 2 swords primarily. You have to accompany your imagination and your emotions together.
Mm-hmm.
When we do any kind of visualization, you have to use the 2 swords together to work with your pain.
And you said that there's a Japanese saying or a Zen saying, I can't remember what you said, but you said there's a saying that says that you can die by the sword or
it'll give you life.
Or to give you life. So when you were saying that, and I was trying to remember what each sword represented, that makes perfect sense if you use these symbolically as, like you said, the long sword or the samurai sword is synonymous with imagination, and then the short one with emotions. And I was thinking about how many people have these short fuses, and how your emotions can just knock you off your base, so to speak.